So please join me in welcoming Mr. Carl Wilkens.
Thanks. Good evening. I'm going to shift over here. Always messing stuff up. But I noticed my wife couldn't quite see through this podium, so I was moving this for her. I look forward to introducing you. And I'm sorry, I'm going to kind of block some of your way so you can. I'll introduce you to Teresa a little bit later. Megan, the girl who wrote that letter, invariably people will say, you know, I kind of didn't want to come to this lecture on genocide. And I run this risk. When she said I'm funny, I'm like, that's interesting. And then she said I told him to play nice. And I'm like, I don't remember saying that. But then people don't always hear what you say. But she got the core of it. I really liked what she said, you know, start small, you know, do what you think is right, do what you think is kind. You know, that part was huge for me. Teresa and I made the decision 5 years ago to quit my regular salary-paying, benefit-given job and start accepting invitations to schools full-time. So now for a little more than 5 years, since January 2008, we've been traveling the country, and it's expanded now to include some other places like China and Russia and the Middle East. Speaking at schools, talking about sharing the stories of Rwanda, giving around 200, 250 presentations a year. It's really, it would be really hard if I gave the dark stuff. And so I always kind of give a disclaimer at the beginning that what I'm going to share with you tonight won't be a balanced presentation. It is much worse than what I'll share with you. So it'd be you can imagine a kid or a person leaving a presentation and saying, well, it didn't sound like it was that bad. And so I just want to say at the beginning that probably for my own self-preservation, since I do this several times a day, and you're actually the fourth group I've gotten to talk to today, we were in 3 classes, so it wasn't quite like this, but 3 other classes before, going over the stories and things. I think I'd probably melted down a long time ago if I was hitting the horrible stuff as it is. I'm also not convinced, as important as it is to learn the horrible stuff, I'm not convinced that real change comes from the horrible stuff. Although the horrible stuff is often that initial impetus, that shock that sometimes we need. And I even catch myself when I say the horrible stuff, because I've taken the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives, the loss that's still felt today very deeply 19 years later, and I've called it horrible stuff. So if I kind of second-guessed myself the whole time, I guess what I'm asking is for your patience with me this evening. If I use some phrases that somehow seem like I've, taken something like horrible stuff and stuff that you'll understand kind of where my journey is coming from, and that I mean no disrespect at all. In fact, I think one of the greatest ways that we can respect those we lost is to share the incredible courage and resilience and even forgiveness that the survivors are showing. Those that were left behind, for the moms and dads and the grandmas and grandpas who died, for them to know that the stories of their children and their grandchildren, stories of courage, resilience, and forgiveness are being told around the world. I think that's one of the greatest ways we can show respect and value that for the horrible tragedy that happened back then. So I used to start back in 1994, and kind of work from there till today. And what I found was that I would run out of time all the time. So I'd spend all my time in 94 and didn't get to talk at all about today. So now I just do it backwards. Because we have to know what it's like today. And 94, we'll get to that part too. But I just want to start with you. I was just in Rwanda in January. A group of students from Buffalo State College. I think I got those. That's not them. Although this is what Rwanda, used to be known for. The girl. Today, you ask anybody Rwanda, do a word association and genocide. Rwanda genocide. Pennsylvania. Dutch. Okay, thank you. And so I don't want to be part of this, you know. I want to be part of the movement that helps people understand, yes, genocide happened, but it happened intensely in these 3 months, and it has parts of it before those 3 months and parts of it still even to today, but there's so much more to Rwanda, which is why I'll get to the college kids in a minute, the Buff State kids, which is why I snapped this picture last January, because Rwanda is so proud of their cycle team. If any of you followed the Olympics here, this summer, Rwanda had its first cycle team, and if you go to YouTube and you type in "Rising from Ashes," you'll get this trailer.
Before genocide, I was still young. For my family, I lost my brother, and then I lost others' family.
The most devastating circumstances can yield the most powerful forms of hope. During the 1994 genocide, many of the cyclists of Team Rwanda were small children. For 11 years, these young cyclists had lived in the aftermath of one of modern-day history's most devastating genocides.
You could see how much hope the bike gave.
And I won't play all of the trailer because you can watch it at home. But look at these little guys, with the bike. These guys who, are in the spandex and all of the, wonderful bike gear now were these little guys years ago on a single speed bike, perhaps pedaling it as a taxi or as a little pickup truck hauling 200 pounds of bananas or something. And you think about that journey. And you heard what he said, out of some of life's most devastating circumstances come the most incredible stories of hope. And so I hope one simple little thing that you'll do when you get home tonight, back to your Facebook page, and some people, they used to say, oh, that's for kids. My 80-year-old mom, yeah, she's all over Facebook. So you just copy that little URL up there, and then we come, oh, I didn't even load it yet, so that doesn't take long. Facebook, none of this really takes long. And World Outside My Shoes is our Facebook page. And what if we just suggest to the people at what's happening? I'll tell you what's happening. Hey, Rosemont, why don't you host this? Check the spelling out, that's done on purpose. Why don't you host this on your campus? Maybe. Command V, boom, there it is, rising from ashes. Save and post. You never know what one little click can do, huh? If Coney 2012, it taught us many things, but one of the things it taught us was all the power we have at our fingertips. We think we're helpless to end genocide. This is one part as you share. And this evening, towards the end, I'll share with you some other tools of what we can do, because there's nothing more frustrating than being presented a horrible problem and then being left like you can do nothing. And I know here at Rosemont, I've been here today, not very long, but enough of a day to know that you're doing a lot of different, you're not helpless in the ways that you're impacting the world around you. But we're going to jump back to Rwanda, past the gorillas, the school teachers we were with this summer. And here's the Buff State kids. These are theater kids from Buffalo State College. The second group I've been able to travel with to Rwanda. Last January, we're visiting the tragic sites, the churches where people were killed. We're visiting the schools where people were told to come for safety and then they were slaughtered. But we're also visiting this guy's farm where he plays classical music to his pigs. He says it makes them calmer, especially at feeding time. He says even though they eat a little less, they're still gaining weight. He's quite an innovative farmer. You want to meet this guy. And other success stories, meeting with people in the government, seeing how Rwanda's government today is so hugely shaped by the role of women. After the genocide, new constitution, we're trying to rebuild a country. Your country has betrayed you and killed the dearest to you. Your church has betrayed you. Your neighbors have even betrayed you. How are you going to build a new life again? And one of the ways they said we're going to do it is empowering women. And so the role of women in government and in private, We could go on and on this evening about the wonderful, the progress that's being made because of the way that women are empowered there. And so these kids now, after spending 2 weeks in January, they then went back to start their, winter, spring term, and they're doing a theater ensemble class where they're writing a play based on their 2-week visit to Rwanda. Anybody, do we have a theater program here at Rosemont? Nope. Anybody here like theater? Of course. Who wouldn't want to? You guys are sent. I'm going to be focused on you. Drama club. Yes. So we'll get you the link. Ask me on Facebook. Say, where's the link? Because last year's group did a play called When the Walls Come Down, Truth, based on their trip. This year's play is based on a young man who lost a friend to suicide. So it's not just like an Africa play. It's what we've learned in Africa and how it mixes the things we share as a human race. And so I think you guys will want to check into some of that. And, construction, the city, 9th fastest growing, this time of global recession, 9th fastest growing economy in the world today. And I could go on and on, but I'm going to just end the Rwanda Today part with this little play. This is a dance school. This is what a good friend of ours, Teresa, and I will meet up with her tomorrow in New York City. Passionate, gifted dancer, started her own dance company here in Philadelphia. Any of you hear Rebecca Davis dance? I forgot, I'm here in Philadelphia. Some of you have heard about her? Well, Rebecca took that passion for dance and her desire to end genocide. And where those two intersect is right here. She started a dance school in Rwanda. There's also another one she started in Ghana and another one in Bosnia. And they're not big, sophisticated affairs. It's not like multi-million-dollar projects. No, this is a simple little classroom, couple of staff members here who are passionate about dancing too. And these are kids who have been carroted in off the street with the carrot of dance. Come 2 days a week, dance, 3 days a week, math, English, and computer literacy, keyboard, whatever type of stuff. And so the instructor here, he says, I've got 3 young men that want to perform for you. This is their own performance, okay? They created, this is their creation. So we're like, yeah, bring this on. Time, okay, got to cut it off, but then I can't. I mean, you just look at these little guys. I asked this 5th grader the other day in Texas, these kids used to live on the street, they've now found this place. What do you think they found? And a little 6th grader, she said, home. And I'm like, absolutely. They found security, they found purpose, they found community, they found a future. And what's not to love about that? The potential, their faces, their smiles, it runs all through my mind as we're going back to the dark time of '94, but also as we're talking about today and what's happening in Rwanda. And speaking of today, I said that was the last one, not quite, I forgot about this one. You guys know GoPro, these great little cameras, they don't have a viewfinder, so you have to do that to make sure that the camera's on. So after you look at the camera, we're heading up the street in Kigali. I dare you to find one piece of trash. Got to be the cleanest city in the world. paying attention to detail. Right here in the bricks on the wall, they're even planting grass inside the bricks on the wall. I mean, everywhere you're seeing attention to detail. And as I skip forward, whoops, I missed them. Right here on the corner, similar to many, many corners, you'll see this guy in this bright jacket, the police force. If your government was part of destroying your life, how are we going to communicate to people that government can be part of building your life again? They're very visible. This is also one of the keys to the low crime rate, low corruption rate. But it's not just having soldiers out there, because there's plenty of countries where you got soldiers out there, but it's the way you take care of your soldiers, the way you take care of your police. What accountability, transparency in government. Anyway, I won't go into much more there, and I'm not going to play the whole video. But as we roll up, and I don't recommend the motorcycle taxis, and here I am riding one in front of you. I just told the guy to go slow. He didn't need to race. We're not, in the Indy, and so he went slow, and he was quite safe, I felt. And we're heading to an appointment at the Milcolene Hotel. This is the hotel that was in the documentary, the movie that was featured in the movie Hotel Rwanda. As we walk inside this hotel, everywhere often when I go back these trips to the city, there's memories all over the place. As we look at these parking spots here, it was the middle of the genocide, and I'll pause right there. My two Rwandan buddies that I worked with during the genocide that were helping me, we'll talk a little bit about, how we were trying to bring food and water and medicine to groups of orphans. And the leaders of the city that we built relationships with to be able to do that. But about the second week of the genocide, I started making tapes to Teresa and the children, because that's finally the point where I quit arguing with God, because I kind of thought I had this deal. God, you want me to stay, you keep me alive. That should be, manageable. And I had no peace with that kind of deal making. And I think when I finally gave up that deal is when I also started to make these tapes to Teresa and the kids in case I didn't see them again. And so each time I'd fill a tape, I'd write on it our address in Spokane, Washington, hoping that if I was killed and if the house was trashed, somebody might find this tape. I mean, it's a long shot, but it was the best I thought I could do, and maybe send it to its intended destination. And fortunately, wasn't killed, house wasn't trashed, tapes went in a shoebox for 16 years. Finally got them out, and so glad to have those recordings, all those little details. So these aren't stories I'm trying to remember from 19 years ago. These are stories I told the day they happened or a week after they happened. And this little short one that this walk through the parking lot here reminds me of is got this title in here. Some of you heard about General Dallaire, the UN force commander at the time. If I wrote the book, you'd think I'd know where it is, wouldn't you? Biscuits and Baby and Rambo Rescue. I'm embarrassed. I'm looking at the table of contents. Fine. Honestly, there wasn't a ghostwriter. I had a really fun editor. But 143, I should have known that. So my Rwandan buddies that I'm working with, they don't get it. They think that, since I'm friends with the UN will do anything for me. So here is a very sad looking little double cab pickup parked in the Milcolene Hotel parking lot. The front fender is bashed in, the back window busted out, ponytail of ripped loose wires hung beneath the ignition switch. You could barely make out the bold black UN letters on the door because the whole truck was smeared bumper to bumper with mud and grease. This was the Interahamwe's way of applying a natural camouflage coating. Many vehicles have been stolen from the UN, and this one the UN had evidently recovered, and now appeared to have abandoned. At least that's what Dawson and Gasiko, my Rwandan buddies, were telling me as they urged me, ask the UN to give it to us. And I'm like, guys, you don't know the UN. They will not give us the pickup. Do you know the red tape? The UN is built on red tape. How are they going to? And no, they're your friends. And so I think finally to get them off my back, I said, okay, I'll ask. And yeah, Dallaire gave me the pickup truck. And so everywhere you go, you get these different memories. And I'm going to just pause on that one right there, because if we went into this hotel, there would be many more stories. In fact, if you choose, and it's a donation for these books. They're out there and they can swipe your credit card or money, but I'm also big on the honor system. If you want to take it and send a donation later of any, we suggest $10, but any size donation you want to send later, there's a website. I'm just making a deal of that because we want to get the stories out. If you know somebody who knows the stories and you walk out of here with 5 books under your arm, that's fine with me. And if you make a $5 donation for 5 books, that's fine with me too. But because it's about getting the stories out there. And so if you do choose to read some stories, or like this little girl in outside of, what's that big university in England? Oxford. Yeah, Oxford. Outside of Oxford, I'm at a high school that's kind of on the other side of tracks. I had a chance to speak, and that was a privilege at Oxford. But you're at a high school, the other side of the tracks, a middle school. And this little girl says, "Where could you get a book like this?" And I said, "Do you like reading?" "Well, no. I said, "Do you read a lot?" And she goes, "Well, no, but that could be my first." And I'm like, "Here." So anyway, if you want to read some more stories, there are stories about the time inside this hotel and many, many others that are wrapped around there. Rwanda's universities, I could go on and on, but we're going to jump back here. This is 1989. Teresa and I actually met in high school. This is our wedding invitation. Back in 1981, 31 years ago, we got married right out of college, like a week after college, and a week later, 6 weeks later, we moved to Zimbabwe. I'm a high school shop teacher, her business and accounting. Our daughters are born in Zimbabwe. Great place to raise kids. Back here again, you got the third little guy there. After 6 years in Africa, we came back to the States, got an MBA, then had this job that I always tell students it's the old-fashioned international development degree, a high school shop teacher and an MBA, and a little love for Africa, a lot of love for Africa. And so Sean is born at that time. Sean's not even 2 years old. So this is moving we're in France trying to learn French, Rwanda, French-speaking country. And when we moved to Rwanda, some of our first projects are building schools. Really rewarding work. I'd love to go on about that some more, but 6 months after we get there, a war starts. Evidently, we find out 30 years earlier, when independence had come, there had been a lot of fighting, a lot of killing of people with Tutsi ID cards, and if in the Q&A time, or I hate to say Q&A because a lot of these don't have answers, but if in our conversational time afterwards you want to talk a little more history, be happy to kind of give you the quick shot that I can on history, but in an even quicker mode. Many people fled 30 years earlier thinking they'll come back when it settles down. The government said no. The new government was like Hutu power was the name of the game. Before, people with Tutsi ID cards have been given privilege, but not everybody, huh? If you guys were all Tutsis, maybe this group would have gotten the privilege. So when somebody says, "Oh, the Tutsis had the privilege with the Belgians," what would the rest of you say? No, we didn't. But yeah, some did. And the same thing then when the Hutus got in power, and this whole idea was Hutu power, again, privilege was too small. But for most of you, whether you're Hutu or Tutsi, you're saying, you know who we are, we're poor. And in that life of struggling for an existence, shucks, you fall in love, and it doesn't matter if she has a Hutu ID card or a Tutsi ID card. And so they married each other by the thousands. So I always want to make a clear point that the genocide in Rwanda did not happen because one group of people hated another group of people. If that was the case, why did they marry each other by the thousands? And the next person then who knows a bit about the story says, okay, so if they got all this love in Rwanda, how did you get a neighbor to kill a neighbor? And I'll say I don't know, but I do know the power of just a little bit of bigotry and just a little bit of fear. How they can grow in enormous, in a way that shocks us all. The potential of a little bit of prejudice, bigotry, to destroy a community, a school, a country is enormous. In any case, this 3-year war is going on when we get there, because those people who fled 30 years ago, they say, okay, we're coming back now, and they've got guns. So this is great for the extremists. They're saying, oh yeah, who's the enemy? Mostly Tutsis, those guys with guns. Who else are the enemy? These people here who stayed in the country and are Tutsis, they're sympathizers. Those Hutus who married to, their enemy. Those Hutus who don't go along with our ideology, their enemy. So this whole construction of an enemy is going. In fact, I gotta write this part down, because being a visual learner and stuff like that, I know that you know that enemies are not born. born, there we go. Enemies are not born. Enemies are constructed. And if you believe that enemies are constructed, then we should be able to believe that enemies can be, and okay, I was leading the kids on at Harrington High School over here. Yeah, last fall I was there. So I was just typing slow like this, and I'm like, so yeah, if you believe enemies are constructed, enemies can be and what did the kids shout out? Destroy. Of course. Because that's what you hear in the presidential debates. Our candidates are saying we have to destroy America's enemies. So this whole idea, I don't blame the kid at Harrington High School over here for saying that. That's what's modeled to us all around. So it's this mind shift that we're going for here, that enemies can be deconstructed. And how would you deconstruct an enemy? And the two tools that we won't spend a whole bit of time on tonight, though, are these two that you all know. You maybe know them in different words, forms, or shapes, but you've experienced them to one degree or another. How stories can inspire service. And how, or action, whatever word you want to put in here, and how service empowers stories. We'll get that W in there. Stories. No, not empires. Empowers. Get the rest of you out of there. You know how without service, stories are meaningless? And without stories, service becomes drudgery, duty, burnout. So this powerful connection between stories and service. That's why half the high schools I go to, it's English teachers that invite me there, not the ones who are covering genocide in their classroom, because they understand the power of stories and how we need to understand that this is the most powerful thing we have at our disposal. It leaves nuclear bombs and everything else in the dust. This power of stories and service. So in any case, the country is at war for 3 years. We're working in displaced camps. People are chased out of their homes. So our work has changed to a large degree, but we're hoping for peace. Man, we're hoping for peace. And at the end of the 3-year war, when they've got a new negotiated, going to be a new government, broad-based, transitional, everybody's going to be part of it, we'll elect and stuff. But there's this small group of extremists that say, we will never share power. And they are the ones who have this. They're the ones with the university degrees. They're the ones who have studied in Europe, Canada, perhaps other countries, especially French-speaking Rwanda, and the plan is to eliminate the other, to destroy the constructed enemy. And so before I get to the plane shot down, here's our home, really comfortable, looking out over the city. That was the city all the skyscrapers in January, how things have changed. Was a great place to raise our kids. I always say everybody thinks their kids are cute. Our whole neighborhood thought our kids were cute. For 4 years, our kids are playing with the neighborhood kids, whether it's a birthday party or somebody donated a boat to a hospital. So before I took it to the hospital, I had to test it, make sure it was working. Nailed a couple tennis shoes onto 2 boards, and presto, we're water skiing in Rwanda. It was just this great place to raise our family. And even though we'd been at war for 3 years, we were sort of isolated from the war. It was in one part. It's amazing when you think isolated. A tiny country, Rwanda, I think we'd fit probably 4 or 5 Rwandas in Pennsylvania. That's how small Rwanda is. But yeah, it was isolated. And okay, the girl who wrote the letter in the book, it was the monkey story she was saying was funny, but we won't do that one tonight. These are our Sean's little buddies, our son's little friends. He's out there for 4 years. Sean, Mindy, and Lisa are playing with the neighborhood kids, building relationships, making deposits in the hearts of the moms, the grandmas, the aunts. How do you deposit in the mom, grandma, aunt's heart? Love their kids, and those relationships that are being built over time. So in this genocide, this thing that, well, number one, there's no such thing as my world here. My world's a fantasy between my ears. We're somehow going to make someplace better by getting rid of somebody. When this whole idea of genocide is launched, and the reason we're even here tonight is to shift our thinking from my world thinking to our world thinking. But if you zoom in, actually, let's take us live. I think I'm online here for Google Earth. And I really love Google Earth. Let's just jump to our house right now. We're in the center of Africa. Even though we're by the equator, we're about a mile high, so the weather's gorgeous year-round. It is this tiny little country. You could put it all in Lake Victoria over there. The tragedy during the genocide, some of you who've seen Goes to Rwanda, you've seen these rivers that are full of families who have been killed. I was talking to a nurse in Florida. She was in Tanzania at the time, and she said, we're trying to get the fishermen, just please wait, be patient, don't be fishing. While I hate to say clean up, because how can you say clean up? We're talking humans, we're not talking trash. When you kill nearly 1 million people and they all aren't going in pit latrines or they're thrown in the river, the shores of this lake are covered with lives. This beautiful little mountainous country, you could never imagine something so horrible could happen. And even people who visit there today, they still stagger under, trying the load of trying to imagine that could have really happened here. They find, my theater professor guy from Buff State, when I first took him to Rwanda, comes back to our guest room and he's just like, it seems like their default setting is joy. How is it that in a country like this that happened? How could there still be joy today? And anyway, these are the stories we need to unpack. One of the things about Google Earth I just discovered, you jump back in time to a little better defined picture here back in 2010. Let's go back. And here's our neighborhood right here. Our house, in fact, this looks like a really nice, because high def or a higher definition picture and stuff. Let's just go back to 2000, 4 years after the genocide. You can see all the dirt roads. And it wasn't as developed, obviously, back at that time. We're living on dirt roads. But since it's harder to see in this picture, I'll finish the story at our home up here in about this time. You saw, well, I don't know if you saw, but we weren't far from the airport. The president's plane is shot down. This doesn't cause the genocide, but the event they used to launch the genocide. Those Tutsis, those cockroaches, those snakes, all of the dehumanizing terms for the Tutsi people, those who've come with their guns and stuff, we told you they were no good. They killed our president. Now they're going to be in your neighborhood. They're going to kill you and your children. You've got to kill them, their sympathizers. If we would have killed all of them in 1959, we wouldn't be dealing with them now. And so this huge, horrible, kill your neighbor campaign is launched. And in our neighborhood, this guy right here in this beautiful 3-story house, a banker, he's one on the top of the list to be killed. Usually he'd back his Audi out the garage and go to work. But Thursday morning, plane shot down Wednesday night. This is all happening just 19 years ago last week. They take his life. They boosted their children. Like any mom and dad, they're thinking of their kids. They managed to boost their children over the fence, I'm told, and that they survived in this little orphanage. And in this orphanage, it's hard for me to just put the hand on the roof of that house right there without telling you the story of Harry, H-E-R-I, but I'm going to resist. Harry was the watchman who stepped up, became the director when the couple in charge of the orphanage left with all the other foreigners, leaving 30 little kids, 5 and under. All of a sudden, you start to easily get angry and judge that couple, and yet we don't know their story. We don't know why they left or how or whatever. But what I know is that this man from the Congo, this guy who I find out later was orphaned at age 7, is the one who, he could have shown his foreign documents to the soldiers who came, and he could have gotten out of the country. But no, he steps up and he becomes the director of this orphanage. And 29 of the 30 children survived the genocide. A mortar landed in the front yard, taking the life of one of the little ones. But Harry, an incredible, incredible man. We're watching them walk down the street on Thursday with the furniture from their house, a television, perhaps a stove and a wheelbarrow. And that night, to the gate comes a gang. They've been trained as civilian defense forces, what they were told. You're going to back up the soldiers. But in reality, they're being trained as killing squads. They come to our gate. We have no idea that they're there. We're in the hallway of our house, settling the kids down for sleep in the hallway, guys. We can't be in the bedroom with the windows. So we're trying to, stay away from the windows. We're going to make a little party here. We'll bring the television in the hallway. We'll watch Sesame Street or something. And outside, a gang is gathering at our gate. And we never know until the next morning, because from these little mud brick tin roof homes, remember I told you, making deposits in the hearts of moms, grandmas, and aunties and stuff, come women, courageous. I don't think they're ordinary, except they would tell you they're ordinary. But these women come out maybe a dozen, I'm not sure how many. They stand in front of our gate and they say, no, you can't come in. Who are these women to stand in front of these guys with machetes? These guys perhaps barely have their pants pulled up. They've been doing terrible things in our neighborhood already. Who are these women to stand in their way and to say no? And with what arm? I mean, they're armed with stories. I always say, well, of course, that's what grandmas are always armed with, huh? Stories. And these women just start telling stories about our family, about, taking someone to the hospital in the middle of the night, little neighborly things that any of us would do for our neighbor and stuff. But now this night, those little stories become huge in terms of somehow changing the thinking of these guys with their machete and their clubs and stuff. And maybe they wouldn't have, I kind of think that they would have just robbed us. The neighbors, when we talked to them, they said, no, your lives were in danger. They had no doubt that they were standing up, fighting for our lives. We didn't even know it. And they turned them away. They said, this is Comrade and Lindsay, Sean's, our son's best friend's grandma. She was one of those ladies. They said, we told them that they can't go in there because your kids play with our kids. It doesn't really make sense, but it sure does make heart, huh? There's so many things. We're trying to figure it out, especially from the comfort of, security of America. A kid asked me once in Portland, she said, what were you doing for your neighbors those first days? And I said, nothing. I was watching after my own family. And yeah, I was on the radio and trying to help some other Americans around the country and talking to the embassy and stuff. And yet, here were these ladies. They didn't even have a light switch in their house, huh? Little metal can with some kerosene in it, a little metal chimney with a rag stuffed in it and a light, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't go outside, I don't have a flashlight or something. No, these ladies courageously come and they risk their lives. So before Teresa and I ever made the decision that I would stay, which is where we're heading here in a minute, these ladies courageously came and stood up for us. So the soldiers are coming. I'm going to skip through these frames. They're very powerful stories. If you get a chance to watch this documentary, Ghost of Rwanda, I hope you will. They pulled a bunch of it off of the internet, I guess, copyright stuff, I don't know. It used to be all over YouTube. Now it's hard to find. But if you come on our Facebook page, you come down a little bit, I got some of it stashed in Vimeo. I figure if I'm in the documentary, I can bend the rules a little. I don't know, that's probably a sort of entitlement. But in any case, if you go farther down on our Facebook page, you'll at least catch 30 minutes of these clips from this documentary. If you don't, get it from your own library or here at the school. Because you need to enter into the shoes of this television lady who's facing this Rwandan lady who's begging for her life. 2 weeks ago, I was with a journalism class, Ohio University, and we were just trying to brainstorm. What was this television lady's? What were her options? She felt she had no options, and she left with the soldiers once they had collected the foreigners, and then all of these people were massacred. Amazingly, there seemed to always be a couple who survive. And I met this young lady a couple years ago in Canada who had survived. She had played dead underneath the bodies. And again, you ask yourself, how do you live after something? It's fabulous, you're alive, you survived, but then how do you really come back to life when you have those kind of horrible memories, when you've experienced such loss of your family? One of the ways the college kids for some years now in Rwanda have been rebuilding their lives, who have no family basically left, is they've started making families among their own collegiate classmates. Guys, let's just make a family here. Okay, we're the Smiths. Okay, they might be a little different than the Smiths, but and they'll be like, Dan, or they'll call Emmanuel. They'll say, Emmanuel, you are you're like the most responsible one among us. We all know it. You're going to be the dad, okay? And Anna, you listen so well. You've got such a heart. You're the mom. And this is no little game. This is a union for life. As they get married, and as their kids are looking for grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins who wouldn't be there, these are the new aunts and uncles and cousins. You see, what you see again and again in Rwanda is that Not everybody, because we're all human and we all come through things in different ways, the way we weather storms and stuff. But again and again, you see this truth that says we're not defined by what we don't have. And often this is like physical things we think, because I don't have this piece of equipment, this electronic or whatever, this thing. No, what about when what you don't have is a family? We're not defined. You see this again and again. We are, however, defined by what we do with what we have. And all of a sudden, that has applications not just for people who have lost family, but that has applications for all of us. The way we have been blessed so enormously. The question isn't, should America be the world's policeman or whose responsibility, or is it like that? I don't know anybody who just loves this word, responsibility. Can we spell it? Not really. Actually, these are all little tricks I do here to keep your attention. But you take this word and you cut it in half and turn it around. Ability. Get that in there. Ability. Is that even spelled right? Yes. Thank you. To respond. Oh, you had the ability to respond because you knew how to spell ability. Respond. Do you get this? Somebody's broken down on the side of the road, and it's like, oh, whose responsibility is that? And we can. Oh, okay, sorry. I said people don't like responsibility. We love responsibility when it's a torpedo we can throw at somebody else. Then we love responsibility. That's your responsibility, But all of a sudden, when you cut it, turn it around, you say, do I have the ability to respond? Yeah, I got a cell phone right here in my pocket. Yeah, I know how to change the tire. And in genocide, oh man, cell phone, tire. I know how to listen to learn a story. I know how to take time out of my day for somebody else. And as we learn that story, then I know how to form a partnership, that we can become partners in these things that we've discovered here. And so, in any case, the women courageously, this television lady, yeah, okay. One of the things we came up with those students when we're saying this television lady, what's she going to do in this situation when this lady's begging? Well, you can't take everybody with you, somebody says. And then, well, somebody said, well, what if we offered to at least take the babies? I mean, it's a terrible, terrible situation. But we say we can't fit everybody in the car, so we write everybody off. One of the things I think is that when we're in a terrible situation and we see A is horrible, B is horrible, I don't know where C is, stop. Don't keep going with the flow. Because in that stopping, I think it's like a river. The water has to come around us. Somebody's going to be disturbed one way or another. And somehow in that stopping, we're going to see C. We're going to see that third option. Okay, not always. Because we know the people who have died because they would not accept A and they would not accept B, and they died looking for C. So as the foreigners are leaving, Teresa and I won't get into the UN right now, Teresa and I have a decision to make. And Teresa, would you join me? Where's the clock? What am I doing? 7:58. This young lady lived and worked in our home. The kids loved her, we loved her. You loved her French, huh? She spoke really easy French. When we were talking about this decision about staying, what are some of the things that you remember from that conversation, or whether in the bedroom when we were talking, or what are some of the things you remember?
As it came right down to the decision, it wasn't like it was a sudden new idea that came right then. It was something that the situation had caused us to really consider for several weeks, actually. And but still, even with that preparation, you might say, coming right down to it, it was, are we ready to stick with this decision? And basically, having her right there in our house, recognizing what would happen as we heard over the radio of the killing that was going on in other places, really, I guess, firmed up our decision to do whatever we could to, if there was something possible that we could do to help ensure that she would live. And so our decision was that Carl would stay and hope that by staying that would save her.
How long, what were you thinking what were the time frames in our mind?
Well, we knew it was really serious. At that time, we didn't recognize that it was a well-developed plan of genocide. We thought, for me personally, I thought, well, the plane with this country's president had just been shot down. There was a real backlash of reaction. There had been already different backlashes for other political things, and so everything had, each time before, had calmed down. Businesses had opened. We'd carry on with the usual daily duties and activities. So I thought that we were talking about the idea of maybe in a couple of weeks, things might settle back down again, and the embassy even confirmed that when they first told us to just sit tight and keep our heads down.
And so Teresa and I, like she said, I said 2 weeks maximum. This thing can't last more than 2 weeks. And my mom and dad were visiting at the time, so that adds all new dynamics as well. But here's the kids. The convoy on its way out, the Americans, Canadians decided to drive. You look at the kids, they don't look like they're fleeing a genocide, Sometimes at the roadblock, they would bang on the side of the camper. Teresa, you said they would sometimes try the handle on the door. But yes, Lisa with her legs crossed, were you afraid? No. Why not? Because Mom wasn't afraid. This whole role that, talking about rebuilding Rwanda and the role of women in the rebuilding process, and then of course we gotta shake our head and say, what in the world are we doing in America? Why are we still so behind in terms of women and trusting and empowering? Anyway. Teresa took the kids. They went to Burundi. Burundi became too unstable. They went to Nairobi. She every day would find someone to watch the kids. And we got to talk on the radio. What were some of those radio conversations like? Teresa's walking downtown to the American Embassy. I'm setting up our radio in the hallway of our house. That's where I was sleeping, in the hallway. And that's the little radio with the microphone. I'd hook up the car battery and the inverter and turn on and the static, and I would listen for this sweet sound that would cut through the static. Her initials are TW, Tango Whiskey. Sounds kind of cool, huh? And our home station, because we used it for work around the country, was 7.6. So we'd turn it on and I'd listen in the radio for this.
7676, this is Tango Whiskey. Do you copy?
And I go, yes, Tango Whiskey, this is 7.6, go ahead. And we had these wonderful radio conversations every single day. Huge thing for me, and I think
very much for me as well.
And so, well, there's a lot more to unpack from that, but suffice it to say that it was much tougher for Teresa in this whole thing. When you begin to unpack this story, you moms know exactly what I'm talking about. A love that actually is willing to let go and trust is often very rare. Were you about to say something? Yeah. All right, thanks, love. Please catch her later with your questions. I'm going to just wrap it up here. If you do have some questions, let me just wrap it. I haven't put their picture in the book yet, and I mean to next time, but if you do grab a copy, this is the pastor and his wife who stayed in our house. This is the lady, when the soldiers came to the gate, she was the first one that would deal with them, or the militia. You'll quickly learn to love this lady. In fact, she and her husband, let me show you, we're working on a little documentary that's just a couple weeks away from being finished, and we pulled out some old home videos. So this is one that I shot April 12. So this is 6 days after the plane was shot. What's today? Okay, so we're almost 19 years ago today. I shot this little piece.
A beautiful sunny day. This is
Tuesday, and nobody can believe what is hidden by this beautiful sunny day.
Looking out from our front yard.
The corner of our yard. This house over here is just on the other side of the street. You can see the hole in their metal roof from where I smoke.
I can't, I got to interrupt that guy. But the mortar just fell right across the street in that house. They're raining down all around us. The ones they're saying the only ones that can be on the streets are the ones who are doing the killing here. And of course, here's the pastor and his wife who stayed with us.
Bottle over the fence was a survival time those 3 weeks. How can we get enough food and water just to survive?
Electricity went off yesterday, and so come in, Mom.
I can't figure out why amidst the gunfire we're laughing. I guess it's a coping technique. But that's the pastor's wife. She comes in, and she headed back into the pantry where she and Anita, they laid claim to the pantry. They drug a mattress in there, and they're like, this has the most walls between us and the outside. This is where we're sleeping every night.
This morning.
During those first 3 weeks, there were several incidents when soldiers came, wanted to know who was there. I mean, there was this time that we actually paid off the militia about $100 to save the lives of the people in our house. You just did what you had to do, each threat, each challenge that came.
Plus, he doesn't seem to be bothered by the shooting. Poacher up there, he's just looking all around, and that seems too close. Now here's the whole bedroom.
Yeah, I look back at these things and I'm like, you know, you look back at it with the hindsight now and it looks so different than your day-to-day just moving through and coping. But to get us to a point here, where I'll wrap this story up, this guy in the top corner here is in charge of the city. The extremists have taken over, but they fled the city because of fighting. They left this man in charge. He and I somehow become friends. His name's Colonel Renzaho. While he later is convicted for genocide crimes, he's in prison, serving the rest of his life in prison today for genocide. He helped me to help others. He directed me to this orphanage, fresh little graves inside the gate, not from little ones who are killed by machetes and mortars, but they died from diarrhea, dysentery. Nobody should die from diarrhea. All they need is water. So I start trying to bring them water, trying to bring them food. This is the director of the orphanage, another courageous man I'd love to have more time to tell you about. And so the rest of the genocide is spent in making deals with killers and thieves, getting through roadblocks, getting fuel for the vehicle, getting a big stash of powdered milk. Then I can't take it to the orphanage, they'd rob us. Take it home, they'd rob us. I take it to the colonel's office. Colonel, I need storage space for these 15 cases of powdered milk, and he gives me storage space in his office. So this is the head, Wikipedia says he was in charge of the killing squads in the city. I don't know that from my experience, although I did see killing squad leaders. One day I came in the parking lot and it was jammed with about 300 of these guys. And I'm standing in his office looking out at the parking lot saying, Colonel, I don't know what influence you have on these guys, but they're making my work awful difficult. A work that the Colonel had given me. And he never even responded to that comment. But afterwards I noticed a real change, that it made it easier to move through roadblocks. And so, okay. I want to take some questions, but I also want to tell you about two people, because I told you about tools and what we can do to end genocide. And so, shall we go with the questions, or shall I go with the two people? Okay, two people have it. One is a kid that I met when we were, oh, by the way, that's our family today, all the kids grown up and stuff like that. Somebody asked if our kids were in middle school, and I'm like, well, no, you saw the old pictures. And there's Anita, the young lady who is in our house. She's married today. Those are her handsome sons. Tragically, Anita lost most of her family. And she married a man, just like before the genocide. Here's a lady, she marries a man. He had, today it doesn't say in your ID, but he had a Hutu ID card. But no, so many times we just look at these things with these glasses, with these labels. Fortunately, there's people like Anita who look with other glasses, and more people who survived from the orphanage And Sandra's a health worker. Kevin's an attorney. He was a little kid. Grace, she's an electrical engineer. And John Bosco, an artist. It's really neat to meet these people after, years later. But one year, Teresa and I decided that instead of flying around so much, we did a little flying, we're going to ride our bikes. Our plan was to ride from Spokane to Seattle to LA to DC. It's not exactly the way it ended up. We just made it to LA, which still isn't bad. That's 1,600 miles, okay? But in any case, as we're pedaling around at the schools and stuff, it was a fabulous experience. But this kid here, Jordan, in 8th grade, he learned about Holocaust. All through high school, Jordan's working, raising fundraisers, going to rallies. What can I do? I'm like, when I graduate, I'm going to Sudan, he says. He's all over the internet. Nobody wants this 18-year-old kid with no skills in any organization in Sudan. So he meets a guy from Sudan. You've heard this term, Lost Boys of Sudan. He meets this tall guy who at age 5 had fled the fighting and went 1,000 miles on foot. Meets him in San Jose at a rally. I want to go to South Sudan. And you can imagine this tall guy looking at this American kid saying, you want to go to Sudan, huh? And anyway, the end of the conversation, the deal is made. Because Dang, the Sudanese guy, is going home for the summer. His wife and kids are in Kenya. You come to Nairobi, I'll take you to Sudan. They get on a bus in Nairobi. In Kampala, he raised $3,500 in Templeton, California. And I think Dang, as an MPH guy, his health emphasis, Jordan, mosquito nets. We need mosquito. So here's Jordan, the 29th of June, 2010, a couple weeks after graduating from high school, standing under a tree in South Sudan, distributing 525 mosquito nets to moms who were pregnant or had little babies. That means 1,050 people. We're coming up on that was 3 years ago. I would love to know, I have no way of knowing how many people are alive today that wouldn't be, malaria being the killer that it is. Because Jordan just had, Jordan's not done, huh? That's just right out of high school. Jordan's there at Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach. His last spring, his Arabic teacher is telling him about her family in Syria. She's from Syria. After classes, Jordan like, what are we going to do? And most everybody else would leave class and say, boy, that sucks. And one day I'll make a difference. Not Jordan. Jordan goes to work and he decides, and he's on the phone because we've become good friends. Carl, what? And I'm like, Jordan, you got to keep doing your school too. So how are we going to do them both? And so he makes a plan to go to Amman to continue studying Arabic. Can't find a school affiliated with Cal State Long Beach? That's no problem. Go talk to the academic dean. And the academic dean is like, what do you want to do? We'll make it work. And so I said, Jordan, did you have to read all those forms and stuff, to get through all that? No, I never filled out any forms. Jordan spent last semester, he had a little inn in Jordan. I want to confuse you. His name's Jordan, in Jordan. His grandpa's from Jordan. His grandpa's family packed him up on a plane and got him out of there when his grandpa was a high school kid because he got arrested for some human rights thing that his grandpa was doing. I think it runs in the family. But anyway, Jordan is back in Jordan here last September because not just to study Arabic, but he wants to get to the camps. Jordan really believes that, this is while he's still in Sudan, he's like, soccer's the universal language, but Jordan wants to get into the camps. So this is his excuse. He'll study Arabic in Amman, and then 3 days a week he catches a ride, builds relationships with a doctor group, catches a ride up to the camp on the border of Syria. And Jordan, for 3 months, was building relationships in this camp, meeting the people, learning their stories, writing the blogs, taking the pictures, and sending it back to America. All those people who helped raise the $3,500 to South Sudan, of course, his following has grown much larger by now. And as I walk through, I'm in Jordan last December because of Jordan. I Skyped him into a bunch of schools. We were at Chestnut Hill over here this fall. Jordan was Skyped in, and one of the kids came up afterwards, and he's like, kind of embarrassed to say, but I was like, Africa's always in trouble, and there's nothing I can do about it, and I even find myself not caring. But when I heard Jordan and saw what Jordan was doing, and that Syrian mother who said to Jordan, look at my children, Jordan, I could be your mother. And that kid at Chestnut Hill realizes it's true. Those connections that Jordan was part of making. So by the time November rolls around, Jordan's like, come on, you got to come to here before I leave. And I'm like, well, let's get on orbits and see. And so long story short, spent 8 days in December there with Jordan, walking through the camps, meeting the people, learning the stories, then finding ways that we can partner. This is the formula. I know people might say it's not a silver bullet, but I don't know any better formula than learning the stories. And when we learn the stories, we often have to shut up. We have to lay our agenda aside. We got to not listen to a story so we can tell our own story. But so that we can actually step into those shoes. And then how can we be a partner? Not poor people, oh, you can't do it. No, they can do it. They're creative, they're not poor. But partners, that's a great idea. The last person, the other person I wanted to share with you this evening, is this kind of really a proud uncle kind of bragging type of thing. So I've just given you that disclaimer, okay? But if you punch in here on YouTube, command, African rice heart. My niece spent 6 months in Chad, and she actually wrote a book from all the blogs that she made during her time in Chad. And she's working on her master's right now in creative writing. So those of you with a passion, this is her family of 19 that she spent 6 months with. I hope you remember all these names. Inside their houses, oh, my love. Her African mom and dad, he's a nurse at the hospital, and mom's got her hands full with a family of 19, and they got the most awesome toys. Serious, check out this toy. This is her African mom. And the story African Rice Heart is coming from the journey that rice goes through from the field to the tummy, and the journey our heart goes through. You can easily guess her name, huh? Jolie in French, beautiful. I'm sorry I don't have a suitcase full of her books. I'll be a little better organized next time. But I'm thinking especially, okay, that's her African dad. He started as a janitor, and now he does C-sections. Talks about one night when they were staring at the moon through that beautiful African sky and telling the kids that a man actually walked on the moon. Imagine telling somebody for the first time that somebody actually walked on the moon. Well, I really appreciate your folks coming out this evening. I'll take maybe 2 questions, if there are 2 questions or comments. And please.
Do you think maybe the way society influences people, because you said the Belgians only gave priority to a small group of Hutus that the others thought, or they were forced or maybe tricked into thinking that if they followed the path of Hutus that had power, that they would eventually get power as well, like they would get favor from the Belgians if they followed in the footsteps.
You know, I with the class earlier today, we were kind of doing a really quick, rough pie chart of why somebody would do this. And saying how each slice is going to be a different size for different people. I think part of it was people thought for their own gain, that might be a slice of the pie. I think part of the slice of the pie might have been plain old greed. If I don't steal the roofing sheets, somebody else is going to steal the roofing sheets. If I don't kill somebody, that whole kind of type of thinking. I think obedience to authority for some people is going to be a bigger slice or a smaller slice of the pie. The government is ordering this. I think there were people who thought, honestly, that it was the right thing to do, as twisted as that is. How do you get to that point? Again, what size of the... And there was prejudice. In every society, there's prejudice. So for some people, there would be hatred. But I don't think that that was a major slice of pie for most of the people. I think fear was a major slice of pie for many people in that whole process. But as we try to unpack and read the different stories, I think we're going to find characteristics that we see all around us here too. The things I've just referred to, I think you could find examples of them right here at Rosemont. So thanks for that question. Just a few thoughts there. Please. Yes.
I know that you've dealt with this in a little bit of a different way than trying to start or upkeep a college organization, but I've been having trouble, not at this campus, sorry, I'm not a great student, but there's been a lot of apathy regarding genocide, human rights issues of that nature. How, when there was no one else to help you, did you find those diamonds in the rough to give you aid?
Stories. I know it's like, you know, there is so much apathy out there, but there's also people out there doing it that if we'll really look, we'll find there's allies there. I think, you know, one of the things someone asked me today about how you know our life has been changed or come on, how do I get out of you? And I said in every crisis we need an ally. And I think those allies are there. They're often in very unexpected places. And maybe you're not finding allies in your peers. I'd be surprised, but I can understand also that it can be really seem thin. Then there's going to be allies in someone else that you just haven't yet seen because they're there. When I think about the genocide, you wouldn't think that this guy who's in charge of the city, who's in prison now for genocide, would be an ally. But I spoke to him as if he was. And I gave him what respect I could give him with his position of authority. And so I think that it's easy to just look around and see a bunch of apathy. It's not easy to find that pair of eyes that really does care. But they're there. You just got to know that they're there and then move forward. And sometimes your stepping forward is what that other person is waiting for because they weren't willing to step forward first. And so I believe that they are there, and that as we share stories and then opportunities, Jordan isn't just sharing stories, he was working to raise funds for better housing. The tents were freezing cold in the wintertime. And I mean, I know it might be better than some refugee camps, and you can't just all try to compare one. You just got to do what you can right there in that space. And when people taste it, just a little taste, that's usually one of the biggest motivators because then they find out why they were made. A few ideas. Thanks for that question. There was one other up there, and then we'll, please.
I was wondering if you could share with the group how you stepped beyond the almost paralyzing fear that you must have felt at many moments. What comes to mind is when the orphanage was surrounded and you went to someone who could have taken your life.
Yeah.
How do you step beyond the fear to be someone who knows the next step?
The director, let me pull up his face. I was just trying to think of something visual to go along with that concept. The director of this orphanage, Damas, there you are, buddy. He and I were in Washington, D.C. about 10 years ago, and somebody from NPR was interviewing us, and I was translating because he speaks more languages than me, but he doesn't speak English. He speaks French. And so I was translating, and the reporter said to him, which one of you was in more danger, you or Carl? You know, and I'm like, oh, that's an easy one, Damas. He's out here in the worst part of the city. He's got all these people surrounding, wanting to kill the people he's taken in his orphanage. I'm a foreigner. I have a certain amount of respect and even protection that came with being a foreigner. Also, it made me stand out to be a target too. That was kind of a downside. But in any case, there's no question in my mind, him. But I'm like, okay, translate the question. Damas, he wants to know. Damas is like, absolutely no question. You, Carl. You were under more. You were driving through the city every day. You were going through roadblocks. You stuck out. He had his, I had mine. And I think that beginning to understand something about that question is where our focus is. And it's easy to say, your focus should be on somebody else instead of yourself, until you're in the middle of that situation when you think you're going to be killed. And that's why that time when we're surrounded at the orphanage and I'm thinking that we're all going to be killed, I'm not just calmly saying, okay, my focus is on others and I'm going to be all right. I'm sick to my stomach. I'm about to vomit. I'm like, if I leave here, they'll be killed or no? Is my leaving here really going to get help, or is my leaving here just saving my skin? And so when you're in the thick of some of these things, there is no peace at that moment. Hopefully you get some peace later. But that moment, the adrenaline is rushing. And what keeps you from being paralyzed, though, is the potential. The potential for something incredible happening. Somehow my presence was stopping the guys from coming in. So that seemed to make sense to come. And then when the police came, and I'm like, well, will you spend the night? No. Well, what do we, you go and find him. Is he trying to get rid of me so he can help him kill? And can I trust him? So there's no real good formula, except that I know I wouldn't have kept going out of the house every day if I didn't, one, believe that I could make a difference, and two, really believe that people were counting on it. So having a mission is your best antidote for paralysis from fear, I think. But I just don't want to make it sound too clean and tidy, because it's just not clean and tidy. It's ugly and scary at times. But then you also look around, and that idea of an ally, I would go back to that and realize, you know what? There's Damas out there. He's made it through another night. I'm not going to not go there because. And so you see those allies. The young lady in our house, she's making pancakes. She had something to do. I think that was so important for her, having something to do, whether it's as simple as making pancakes or trying to stand off a massacre, that having something to do. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate your being here, your attentiveness, and if you like to send messages afterwards on Facebook, I'm no good with the news feed, but make it the message button, and I'll do my best to communicate. And I really thank you, the Center for Ethics and Global Leadership.
Ethical leadership and social responsibility.
Ethical leadership and social responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, and very special thanks both to Carl and Teresa Wilkens for joining us tonight. Mr. Wilkens is going to set up at one of the tables out in the foyer there for those who are interested in picking up one of his books, and we'll be there in about 2 minutes. Thank you.